Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Daily Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today is a very longtime friend, John Richardson. John is the purveyor of the Only Guns and Money blog, which you can find at onlygunsandmoney.com. It used to be other places, and we'll be getting into that in a little bit. But John, thanks for joining me today, man.
Thanks for having me, Paul. I appreciate it.
So we were talking a little bit before we started recording. If you would take us back to what started the Only Guns and Money blog, and how long have you been doing it?
Sure. I started in May of 2010. I named it No Lawyers, Only Guns and Money, because I'm not a lawyer. But I did work in the financial services industry, and I was teaching financial planning and retirement planning at Western Carolina University. I've been a long-time blog reader, and I finally said, I can do this. I can write. I can talk about stuff. I have ideas. And my initial intention was to do a little bit of personal finance mixed with a lot of gun stuff. Over the time, the financial stuff went away and totally gone away, and thanks to my employer putting a kibosh on it. They don't want it, period. I'm not even supposed to, I can't say who I work for, none of that. I mean, you used to work in a very regulated industry, so you'll understand. Mm-hmm. But I was very fortunate in the beginning. I got picked up by some other bloggers, and then they started linking to me. People like Sebastian at what was then called Snowflakes in Hell, and then Say Uncle at Say Uncle blog, and they would link to me a lot, and that brought me a lot of readership. Michael Bain would link to me occasionally, and that brought in a lot of readership. I must say blogging's not quite what it used to be. People don't read blogs as much as they used to. They go more for podcast, and especially for stuff like YouTube or video. It doesn't have to be YouTube. It could be Full30 or Venmo or whichever. But, I still like writing. I still like blogging, and I'm just going to stick with it.
Well, sure. And you... Well, there are some bloggers that are still, from when I very first started getting involved in gun rights, there were more blogs than you can shake a stick at. But for current blogs, we've got yourself, Rob Morse of Slowfax, and we've got Miguel Gonzalez of Gun Free Zone. Mm-hmm. And a few others are still doing it, but it's probably less than a dozen people that are actively blogging about Second Amendment rights right now.
About rights, I think you might be correct. I mean, there were always a lot of people writing about this and that, but it just, it's much easier just to watch a video than to actually read and follow links. And one of the things I always tried to do was make sure that everything was documented. I had links where people could follow and get more information. If I took something from somebody, I always attributed it. I didn't want to be the be-all and just like, I am the font of all information. You need to go and check it out, this other stuff. Also, in the early years, I think I tried a fine line, as people would say, between the prags and the threepers. The prags were the very pro-moderate NRA sorts. The threepers were, we need to be more radical, we need to be pushing for our rights. People like the late Mike Vanderboe did a lot of stuff back then on Operation Fast and Furious, also known as Project Gunwalker. Yeah. Did a lot of stuff on Second Amendment cases. And there were not as many back then. Now it's almost impossible to keep up with all the different cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And people don't realize it was bloggers. Oh, like you mentioned, Mike Vanderbilt, Operation Fast and Furious, which, in my opinion, never got as much traction as it should have in the mainstream media, was not broken by the mainstream media.
It wasn't.
That was broken in blogs, specifically Mike Vanderbilt.
Mike Vanderbilt, David Codrea, and SAF's own Dave Workman. Mm-hmm. The three of them worked together. They had they worked with dissident ATF agents who blew the whistle. I think it was they would feed stuff to, back then it was CBS's Cheryl Atkinson, and she and Bill LaJeunesse were the only two mainstream media sorts who got on board with Operation Fast and Furious, which was a shame because 300 Mexican nationals plus or minus, 2 federal law enforcement officers were all killed with weapons that had been walked across the border at the behest of ATF or the Department of Justice and some other agencies. And it was a scandal, and it still is a scandal.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the death toll from that, I gotta believe, still continues to go up, because a lot of those guns that ATF allowed to go across the border still have not been recovered.
No. I mean, guns last a long time. We all know that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking over your shoulder at the M1 Garand. Mm-hmm. It's still a viable gun.
It absolutely is.
So
I was seeing that, and I don't know how that's going to come, but there was, I believe, tens of thousands of Garands going to be coming back from the Philippines to come into the market.
And I also just heard that there was a treasure trove of M1 carbines found in Ethiopia, and some other company, I mean, just stacks of them, that Royal something or other, there was a Royal Tiger Imports, okay. Just found crate. I mean, it was not even crates. They were all just stacked up like firewood.
Oh, wow.
Who knows what kind of condition, but, Yeah,
that was going to be my comment on that, is what kind of condition, just stacked like that, not preserved in any way, for at least 10, 15 years. What kind of condition are they going to be in?
Well, at least in Ethiopia, it's an arid climate.
It is.
No moisture, no rust. Or a little less rust.
Yes. We kind of strayed off the topic a little bit. I'm sorry about that. One thing that's always, it's the same kind of for podcasters, but especially for bloggers. You're your own editor. You
yes.
Get what you talk about. You know how much time or how little space you're going to give it. What kind of challenges did that present for you? Does it still present challenges 10 years later?
It does, and I will say that my wife is a very good, when I will have misspellings I usually don't sit down and write it out longhand and then type it onto the computer. I'm usually typing it directly in the computer, and it's like anything. You're typing along, you think you've got that word in there might be a word that's missing, and she was very good about reading it and letting me know, you need to fix this, this, and this. How much to put in? Yeah, that's kind of hard. Sometimes you just want to make a little comment and present a video or present a graphic to go with it. I love infographics. Infographics to me are a great way to present a lot of information visually that can in a very limited amount of space. So in terms of editing, I can't say that I edit that much. I just I write when I think I've got enough. Well, that's fine. Sometimes it's hard to find where to stop and how to wrap it up.
Sure. I'm just now getting through my job with the SAF. I'm just now, the last 2 months have been doing writing. and I'm starting to get to the point where it isn't totally painful, but
Right.
it's I got a lot of I've gained a ton of respect for you and anybody that writes for fun or at least for your own personal reasons, not for pay, because wow, it's been a challenge for me.
Well, I understand. I look at your colleague Dave Workman, and I don't know anybody who can put together something and out as quickly as he can.
Oh yeah,
And for me, it takes time.
yeah, for me for a 400 word column, which is for me just a little bit long, but certainly I've done longer. But for a 400 word column, it takes me 2 to 2.5 hours of the actual writing process. I can say 400 words in a couple minutes.
Yeah. I mean, it's like that, especially when I'm going over a legal case. What's the most relevant parts? And it's one thing if it's a 10-page brief, but if it's a 40 or 50-page brief, then you're stuck going through it, trying to pull out the most relevant points and what do you want to quote and what do you just want to refer to. And, I think that was one of the things that got my blog going is I was the first to report on SAF's case post-McDonald, Bateman versus Purdue, and I think I kind of surprised Alan Gottlieb because somehow I got wind of the case. I thought it was from their website, and I publicized it even before they did.
Yeah.
Being that it's from North Carolina, of course, being that I'm also in North Carolina, it was highly relevant.
Right.
So anyway, it was fun. I got to meet people like Alan Gura. The one beauty of being a blogger, or even anything in social media, is that I have been treated almost like I was with the Washington Post or whatever when I went to the SHOT Show or to the NRA annual meetings. Lately, I've actually, I don't want to say become friends, shall we say, but I do correspond occasionally with mainstream media people that Pulitzer Prize winners on the Washington Post, talking about, let's say, the NRA.
Let me switch a little bit of gears here because we're coming close to the time we have today. One thing I've wanted to ask you, and I've never even asked you, and by the way, anybody who knows both John and I knows that for the past several years. John's been a regular part of the Polite Society podcast, but I've never even asked you this there. Thinking back over the past 10 years you've been doing your blog, what are some of the posts that you're most proud of that you think that made the most impact?
One of the first ones was, it was something that was sent to me by a reader named Rob Vance, and it was called Every Picture Tells a Story, and we've done multiple versions of it. And it was on the growth of shall issue concealed carry, and then later the growth of constitutional carry. And that was one of my first major posts that was actually picked up and linked by Instapundit. I put it up, and the funny thing was, back then I would look to see how many readers or how many hits I was getting every morning, and I'd gone to bed, I had like a couple hundred. I wake up the next morning, and there's 17,000, and I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And it got linked more than once, and I think I also said the thing that back then, shall issue is the new normal, which it was, and it is. So that post and that graphic actually got put into the first Second Amendment law book by David Koppel and a few others. They included that in the book, so that was kind of good. Just the reporting on a lot of the early cases, and also reporting on Operation Fast and Furious. The guy, Andrew Traver at the time, was acting director of the ATF, and he was going to be the guy And just what was his background? Why him? And it turns out he was very anti-gun, and he fudged stuff, and he never got it. He never got the job. So it did there's a lot of publicly available information that you can find, and I got pretty good at Google searches, looking at tax databases, property databases, and you can just start putting stuff together.
Yeah, and you are one of the best that I know about that. Whenever there's a something that either in the money world or in the deep research world that I just cannot get a handle on, you're the go-to person. There's nobody I know that's better at that.
Well, I thank you. Hey, a lot of it goes back to my background. I spent 3.5 years in graduate school in political science. My first wife, who passed away a number of years ago, had her PhD in political science, so I knew how to do research. So, you don't lose those skills. I mean, they're not as good as they probably were back then, but you don't lose those skills. And with the internet, it's so much easier now.
I would imagine. Well, we're right up on time for what we have today. Before we take off, if you could briefly tell the story of why it used to be onlygunsandmoney.blogspot.com and now it's onlygunsandmoney.com.
Sure. I woke up one morning and I got a Facebook message from Dave Wharton who said, "What happened to your blog?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He says, "It's not there." And I go to Google Blogger and I look, and it had been removed. They said that I had violated the code of conduct, the code of whatever the regulations were, because I was pushing a regulated product, which could have been drugs, selling guns, whatever, which I never did. And so I immediately appealed, and unfortunately I had not really backed up. So back then it was probably 8 to 9 years worth of stuff just disappeared. In the interim, before I got restarted, I registered onlygunsandmoney.com. I set up a WordPress account. I'd always thought I would switch from Blogger to WordPress just because you could do more stuff. Mm-hmm. Probably about 3 days later, Blogger came back and said, "Oh, yeah, we made a mistake. We're so sorry."
Right.
I'm not sure how sorry they were, but they also got a lot of grief because Tom Knighton at BearingArms.com, Dave Wortman with the SAF, the Gun Mag, the Daily, they both wrote stories about it. It got publicity, and I don't think that sat too well with Google, and they said, "Oh, maybe we screwed up." So, and now I looked up through a mutual friend of ours, Bill Shakas. Mm-hmm. He put me in touch with a guy who is a very pro Second Amendment supporter, and I'm hosted. I'm not even on WordPress.com. I'm on a separate hosting service that's not going to get shut down.
Well, very cool. Well, we are now totally out of time. John, I want to thank you for joining us so much.
Thank you for having me, Paul. I appreciate it.
All right, folks, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and you can do that. If you do that, please hit the notification button so you know that when we release another video, you'll get a notification, and we will be releasing another video tomorrow. Join us for that.